Good morning, Friendship United Methodist Church. I'd like to welcome you on this 8th day of September 2024. My scripture selection this morning comes from 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 1 through 22. I love movies. I love movies because they make me think. No matter what I'm going through, I can walk into a movie theater and focus on a story other than mine. I see the images and how they paint a story about situations in life, real situations and unreal situations. It doesn't matter. For 2 hours and a few bucks, I got to experience a situation. Just a combination of circumstances, a state of affairs in which I become lost, engaged in the flashes and the personalities that remind me of my world, or a world I want to be part of, or a world I wish I knew. Images are telltale signs, random lines from nowhere. One of the telltale signs of our generation is that we are an image-based society. Our culture today is defined by pictures, movies, and the stories that they weave. Have you ever had a random line hit you from nowhere when you're walking down the street or in the mall or whatever? It happens to me pretty much all the time. I hear someone, and I see a couple arguing, and bam! Hits me like a ton of bricks, shut your mouth. Don't look at me like that. Well, that happens. That's life. I don't like it. It bothers me. It's abusive. I hate to see that. But we see those things, and it's part of life today. Some of my favorite movies involve what I call thinker movies, where an ending scene is shown first, and then little cues are dropped all over the place to help you figure out the story so that it makes sense to you. These movies involve us, much like the bam hits me when someone says a line out, like I was talking out the mall or we're on the street. But they involve us one way or the other. We're taken in by that. The audience to take part and see how the people in the story got into the situation that they were in. Have you ever wondered about that? You see someone arguing and you wonder how they got. Perhaps we argue and then our situation deteriorates or whatever, and we wonder how we got there in the first place. How many of you this morning, you don't have to tell me, at all, how many of you recall your first breakup when you started dating? I'm not going to ask you to share, but just recall that. Let it flash through your mind for a bit. And I think we've all been there. Me and this girl have been dating about 4 months, and I was going to surprise her one Friday evening. I usually returned on Saturday and from the classes that I was taking. And on the way, I noticed a car going the other way. You couldn't help but notice it on the twisty curves of Blair Mountain. And there was my girl snuggled up with the driver. Remember those days, guys, when there was no bucket seats or anything like that? Even with bucket seats, you managed to sit close together like that. Oh, goodness. To say the least, I was devastated and didn't bother attempting to make up. No way. However, I kept thinking about the what ifs, the what happens, and the what nows. I was having a hard time focusing on the actual relationship as I kept trying to make sure I would be okay rather than letting the relationship simply develop. Confusion of the depth of my feelings led me to make a decision not to attempt to see her again. And in some way or another, every one of us has been involved in a similar situation where we identify and we walk through our combination of circumstances, our state of affairs of which we are dealing with, the situation of what's going on in our world, all the stuff flashing through our heads, and the core depths of what is in our hearts. And from these, we make a decision. Well, friends, it is this makeup of a decision that we see in 1 Samuel 8. In this chapter, one of the biggest moments in biblical history occurs that sets the rest of the history in motion. In one decision, the people of God find themselves choosing to part with their God. We read the story earlier. As Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons to be judges over Israel, Joel and Abijah. His two oldest sons held court in Beersheba, but they were not like their father, for they were greedy for money. More money, give it to me. They accepted bribes and perverted justice. And finally, the leaders of Israel met at Ramah to discuss the matter with Samuel. Verse 5, "Look," they told him, "you are now old, and your sons are not like you. Give us a king like all the other nations have." In verse 6, Samuel was very upset with their request and went to the Lord for advice. "Do as they say," the Lord replied, "for it is me they are rejecting, not you. They don't want me to be their king any longer. Ever since I brought them from Egypt, they have continually forsaken me and followed other gods. And now they are giving you the same treatment." When we see this situation, many of us immediately respond in shaking our heads at the moment. Some of us even mumbling, "If I were there, I wouldn't have asked for a king." Well, before we make any rash judgments, friends, let's slow it down a bit. A few moments ago, I shared my story of separation. And as I spoke, I'm willing to bet, and I'm not a betting man, but I want to say that my story conjured up relating thoughts to your situations. How many of you thought about times like that in your life? The influences that have affected you, the thoughts going through your head, the values in your heart which you decided instead of contrasting what we think we would do based on the known outcome. Let's understand what happened in the process of understanding the unknown outlook. And in each decision of importance, there are three factors. We sense our life situation. We figure our choices through our head situation. And we make our decision because of our heart situation. So this morning, I want you to walk through this story to evaluate how we sense our own life situations, how we figure out our own choices with God through what is going on in our hearts, and ultimately shed some light that our heart situation determines how we decide. And first, let's get in the time travel machine and go back to the times of Samuel. Look at the situations of our lives through the story of the Israelites. We sense our life situation. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as judges for Israel. And the name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of the second was Abijah. And they served at Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. So what's going on here? Put yourself in their shoes. Now, 3,000 years later, we have the benefit of knowing that Samuel was the last judge and many other things that the people of that time did not know. But like I said, let's travel back to that time, put ourselves in their shoes. So instead of looking at this story from today, let's go to where they are really, so we can get to this situation. Samuel has been present in Israel as a king for a long time, and has been known to be the voice of God, and has applied wisdom and authority as being the judge of all people's affairs. He pretty much kept the tribes together to protect the poor. He was the Supreme Court, the appeals court, the district court, everything. And it was cool because everyone knew that he was just. Now, as he got old, like all of us will notice as we grow old or older, he simply couldn't travel all over and he needed assistance. So he appointed his sons to help him, Joel and Abijah, his boys who watched him as they grew up. And in the tradition of the Jewish persons of the day, they were groomed from day one to follow in their father's footsteps. I mean, if old Sam was a butcher, the sons would know from day one as an apprentice to be a butcher. But there's always a but, isn't there? Have you noticed that? There's always a but. But his sons did not follow their father. They were not just. They were not fair. And the words here show exactly how. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. Extortion, bribery, untrustworthy. The sons of Samuel resembled the mob of today, if you will. They were corrupt. They accepted bribes from those who were rich and decided against those who were poor, those who were innocent. Through relationship or intimidation, they were paid. And under the influence of their power, they twisted their authority for their own gain and caused crimes throughout the land of Israel. And so we see in verse 4, so all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. At this point, we know a few things. The sons of Samuel were perverting justice. They were the lone authority. The leaders of Israel came to Samuel for help. The leaders simply took in the situation of their world and saw a cause for response. Now, let us return to the present. Okay? We're back in the good old USA now. And there are moments in the past 80 years where each generation can remember the exact moment of their surroundings at the very moment of the occurrence. The attack at Pearl Harbor, assassination of JFK, attack on the World Trade Centers, 9/11. My grandfather once shared with me how he keenly remembered everything about the moment when he heard we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, how enraged he was, how he remembered 40 years later his thoughts, his exact location and activities. I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when JFK was shot. I was in the gym at West Virginia University trying out for a basketball when I heard it blared over the PA. I just let go of a jump shot, and it seemed as if the ball momentarily stopped in midair, just hung there. And then slow motion continued towards the goal. Seemed like an eternity before it got there. It was that riveting, that monumental, and I definitely remember the exact moment. I was watching TV in Reynolds, Illinois, when 9/11 happened. I was watching TV when they cut in, showing as the first plane flew into one of the Twin Towers. And not long after, I saw the second plane crash into the World Trade Center on my TV. I remember my feelings. This can't be happening. What is this? My reactions. I remember my anger. I remember it all. Why? Because these events were simply attacks on people and property and our nation, our authority, our identity. With Pearl Harbor, we realized how connected we were to outside events. We lost our long-held identity as an isolated, untouchable nation. In 1964, the sacrosanct pure authority of government was destroyed with the implication of government in-house assassination. And finally, 9/11. The security of our nation was destroyed as we were attacked by people, not by the government. We now realized that we could be attacked anyway, and anytime, and anywhere. And as I tell my story, I'll bet you too are reliving those moments in some ways. But you can recall where you were, what you were doing, and how this made you feel. Many of you remember JFK's assassination. Many of you remember 9/11. Some of you remember Pearl Harbor. Well, if you can relate to these events, you can relate to how the leaders were feeling when they heard that Joel and Abijah were perverting justice in the name of God. This moment was the Israelites' Pearl Harbor, JFK assassination, or 9/11. It was the first time in their lifetimes that the structure of God was let down. They were lost, scared, confused, but determined to do something. So they went and gathered together with the one person they could trust to figure out what to do, Samuel. We've all had personal situations that we're facing, haven't we? We've been there many different times in our lives. We all react and respond in our own ways, so we can relate to the situation of these leaders. First of all, this morning, I brought up arguably the three single events that rocked our nation in the past 80 plus years. But today, I brought these up to conjure our relationship to the things in our lives that make us react and respond. This morning, as we mull over these events, let's go deeper and more personal to look at your own unique Pearl Harbors, JFK assassinations, or 9/11 in your lives. What's troubling you? What's troubling you today? Every one of us has troubles of some kind today. What's troubling you, shaking at the foundations of your core, making you question all that makes sense? Now, just for a moment, let the personal struggles come into view as we gather together as believers. Even before I finish that sentence, I know that those thoughts have come to you instantly this morning. And know this first. Things in life occur that shake us routinely. People do wrong. Our families do wrong. People follow selfish desires and take from us, destroy our innocence. Some of us have been betrayed emotionally, intellectually, personally in ways that to even speak would probably cause even more harm in adding salt to an open wound. But honestly, these are normal in that everyone goes through some sort of situation that hurts us at one time or another. It definitely doesn't make it right, does it? But I'm bringing this up to you to tell you that you're not alone and that we're all facing situations that rock us together. Because we can all relate somehow. Know first that everyone in this world, in humanity, faces these moments every day. And likewise, when they occur, we, like the leaders of Israel, respond. We gather together. We call in our friends who understand us. We sit alone in our cars or houses and scream or think or take a walk or sit down with our heads in our hands because we don't know what else to do and simply question. We question, we question, we question. Scream or whimper, and yet we question. And I want you to know that these always happen so that we don't get lost in the affairs of this world and the actions of those who follow selfish desires. The hurt and pain that enveloped my choice. Remember when I told you about the first breakup in my life? Well, I was thinking of a lot of things. How I was cheated on. How I remember hurting so much I could taste it. How it actually made me cry so hard from the emptiness I could hardly feel in my chest that I considered that evening of taking my life. The only time that ever came into my head. Anything was a better feeling than that. I vowed that evening that I would never lead with my heart, but my head. I vowed that evening that I would never lead with my heart, but my head. Did you get that? To not get wrapped up emotionally, but let it develop naturally. I processed my fears, desires, longings of my life. I began to compare those feelings against one another. I was affected and felt the needs of my life. The feelings, experiences, the whole bit. These natural occurrences led me to a decision. We all have personal emotions which affect us. We all have personal emotions which affect us. These emotions become the filters from which we look at things in making decisions. Now, this second part we know all too well. We can easily relate to and speak about what we feel, experience, and go through. We can connect to songs or TV and movies that make us think about the things we went through or go through. Shoot, the marketing media goes after us on this point of information. I mean, why? Because these emotions and desires are the lens through which we filter everything. The media knows how to get to us, don't they? Now, what feelings are affecting you today? What feelings are affecting you today? What emotions race through your mind, and as you face issues and situations? What raced through your minds this morning when I was talking about relationships, when I was talking about Pearl Harbor and JFK assassination and 9/11? Do we first realize that our lives are not robotic and not regulated to be or make automatic decisions? No, we process every decision that we feel and go through. So I want to ask you, how are you perceiving God and His ways? How did 9/11 affect you? How has your life issues affected your view of God? Are you on the brink of a decision because of what you sense or feel? As you know God, but also know your situations, which experiences come to the surface? We must recognize these emotions and not reject them, but realize, as Paul Harvey would say, there's more to the story, okay? What did Samuel do when confronted with the emotions and desires of the situation? What did he do? He prayed to God. He prayed to God. Samuel is affected by his emotions, and yet still he goes to God. May we do the same. May we go to God when these situations seem to get us down. May we do that. May we go to God in prayer. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Amen.